That's it. All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. I am Justin Canoe, Tennessee Holler. TNHoller.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. We also have all of these hollers hollering all across the state. Thanks to your support, we really do appreciate it. And as always, we want to send a shout out to Elisa Parker. If you're buying or selling in Middle Tennessee, do it through her. And if you need an attorney, Abby Rubenfeld supports us, so support them is a way of supporting us. Obviously, today we come to everybody with a heavy heart. Our thoughts are with the folks in Memphis today. As we know, the Tyree Nichols video will be released after 6 p.m. today. We'll get into that with our guest today, Michelle Mckissack, who's running for mayor of Memphis. But we definitely just want to say, at least at first, that that's what we're thinking about today, and we hope everybody stays safe. And we're going to talk about that here. But today we're talking to Michelle about her campaign for mayor of Memphis, which she just recently launched. MichelleForMemphis.com is where you can go to hear more about it. Michelle, how are you doing today?
Well, all things considered, I'm doing well. My heart's heavy. It's very heavy, and this video coming out this evening, I want to watch it and I don't want to watch it, but it's my duty and responsibility to watch it. So that's what I'm focused on.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that in a little bit. I just want to at least give a sense of, who you are, what your campaign is about. First, you are or were a member of the school board. You are a member of the school board.
I'm a current member of the school board. I served as the board chair during the last school year. So just rolled off with that a few months ago. And I'm from Memphis. I will introduce myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Mckissack, and from Memphis, born and raised. And I have 4 children, been married 28 years to my husband. And I've got a range of kids. My oldest, he is almost 25, and 2 younger sons who are 19 and 20. And my youngest, my little girl, she's 11 years old. So that's a little bit about me. And as far as running for mayor, this was born out of my work as starting off as a PTO parent and being president of my children's parent-teacher organization, which led me to run for school board, trying to have an impact on a broader scale. And after serving 4+ years now, was reelected to a second term back in last August. Just felt the call that as we are looking toward electing our next mayor, our current mayor is term limited. I entered this race because our city needs leadership that matches the scale of our issues and the urgency, and it's on full display for the nation right now. So that is what is driving me: public safety, education, and the city's reinvestment in our young people, in our education system. That's another story, but we get less than 1% of our budget from the city of Memphis toward helping to educate the children of this district. So that's a big driving force. And I'll stop there and see if there's something more you want to learn.
Sure. I guess I do want to talk about that budgetary piece, because I think that kind of ties into the issues that we're seeing right now. But you mentioned why you got into the race.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my understanding of what's going on is it's going to be a pretty crowded field for this race. So, what is it that you think separates you from the rest of the pack?
Right now, it's been 200+ years that the city of Memphis has formally been in existence, and there's never been a woman mayor. in over 200 years. Nashville's had a female mayor, Knoxville's had a female mayor, never in Memphis. And so that is one big aspect of it. And what separates me is that I'm not this career politician. The driving force for me is simply trying to make a difference. This isn't the next notch on my career public service ladder. I just want to see our city be better. I want to make sure that, if you focus on, you talk about the growth of any community, the economic growth of it, and there's been a lot of focus on how can we improve that. We've got to focus on the young people. There's 110,000 plus students within our school district. We're the largest school district in the state. These are the same kids who eventually are supposed to fill these jobs in and around Memphis. But yet and still, due to a demerger that happened 10 years or so ago, the city of Memphis literally gives less than 1% of its budget toward the youth of our city in an official capacity. And so that's a problem. That's a real big problem for me. And so that's the point I'll be driving home. You want to curb juvenile crime, reduce violent crime. And, they're talking about truancy and how that impacts and is a pathway to crime for our city. Well, we need to put our money where our mouth is and invest in our youth.
So what is the percentage that goes towards the police budget?
I wish I could give you an exact percentage, but it is huge. It is significant.
Right.
It has since increased over the last couple of years to address that during the pandemic period. It certainly is way more than less than 1%.
Right. So I guess what I'm asking is, is that something you would support as mayor, is kind of decreasing the emphasis on police budgets and focusing more on preventative measures like education, like community support, that kind of thing? I mean, I know defund the police as a slogan is not something that a lot of people get behind, but as a theory, what it really means, in my opinion, is, thinking more preventatively, thinking more about focusing on social issues and ways to stop these things from happening preventatively, not just punishing and criminalizing our way out of it. So where do you stand on, police budgets and focusing on other avenues?
From my perspective, it's not an either or situation. I mean, we clearly know there is a value in responsible policing, and that's what we need to get at. And we also clearly need to invest in that preventative measure of investing in youth and reducing crime before it starts. That is just a key component. And right now, as evidenced by, the tragedy of Tyre Nichols and a simple traffic stop going so horribly wrong. We've got to do things better. I don't think anyone can say, after all of this, you say that we can't be better, we can't do things differently, and just throwing more money at providing more, guns and whatever tactics. That's not it. We've got to be smarter about this and really listen. There are a lot of experts who've said, let's try things differently. And I think Chief Davis is now speaking to that. And, the Scorpion Unit, which is what the police officers were a part of. And I'm a big supporter. We absolutely, I believe, have to disband that unit. There is something in the culture there where it's not working. And we need to reevaluate all of that. I mean, even including, I was speaking to a colleague the other day, and it was like, even in terms of in our schools, and we have our security, school resource officers, we need to reevaluate. I think as a whole city, it's not just, okay, take care of this one aspect. We need to reevaluate all of it, how we're interacting with our young people, even while they're still in school, and looking at our own security and how we go about when there's altercations or problems arise. How do we go about doing it that is respectful and humane and de-escalating situations before they become bigger?
Right. You mentioned the Scorpion Unit. That is a unit that was launched in November 21 under Chief Davis. People have now said, and Mayor Strickland was behind it also, and people have now said, that they were sort of inexperienced police. They seemed to be running around, wild a little bit. This guy actually was on the news the other night saying they stuck a gun in his face. They were, all over him, and he tried to call internal affairs and they ignored him. And now Tyre Nichols is dead. So I do think that is an important aspect of it. I guess what I'm getting at is, it seems like police budgets are sort of treated as sacrosanct in some ways, not just in Memphis, but all over the country. We saw after the George Floyd protests, police budgets went up across the country, and 2022 was actually our deadliest police killing year ever. So, I'm assuming, let's say I'm talking to the mayor of Memphis right now, right? You are the mayor of Memphis. Would you be willing to entertain conversations that address, steering some of the resources that go towards policing to other avenues? Is that something you'd be open to?
Yes.
Okay.
and a
Trying to get there.
answer, because we've done all of this. What's the saying about you keep doing the same thing, you expect a different result? That's insanity. So, and this is not. I want to be very clear. This is not about defunding the police at all, but it's about reallocating resources, and more importantly, just not just saying that strong arming is the solution. So we've got to do things differently, reallocating funds and seeing how can we invest more in youth, and just how we go about approaching policing and that accountability that comes there. And truly, when there's a concern, when something pops up, like perhaps if that had been addressed when the gentleman that you just showed on the screen, if that had been seriously addressed, perhaps we wouldn't even be here at this moment. And so it's like there's always these little bitty red flags along the way. You can't ignore the red flags. And now,
and I'd say part of the argument for that is the police are being asked to do things they shouldn't be asked to do. There's too much on their plate, and they're trained in a way that it's not about de-escalation. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of thing. There needs to be some outside the box thinking, it seems. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Right, exactly. And I recently heard about a report, I believe it's taking place in Washington, D.C., where the police unit there, where they are, in terms of traffic stops, they created a whole different unit that is outside of, gun carrying police officers to deal with that. And so that's something perhaps that we can look into here, because from what I understand with the Tyree case, that, this was an unmarked car because it was a specialized unit. And so can you imagine, at 8 o'clock in the evening, me, a black Dodge Charger pulling up behind me. You don't even know what type of car it is, but it's like,
crazy.
That's not red flag for me. Like, oh gosh, I'm being pulled over for, it's like, okay, I probably would not even have stopped, because I'm just thinking, and it really, anytime there's, any loss of life, but for me personally, like I said, I have 3 sons, one who's almost 25 years old, so just a few years younger than Tyree. And I honestly, it's like, I get nervous sometimes late at night. I'm like, what time are you coming back? And they're grown. And it's like, I shouldn't have to ask that, but it does. I just like, what if? The what ifs. And I don't even want to entertain it.
Well, unmarked cars, like you're saying, pulling people over for traffic stops should probably be illegal. And I actually have talked to a legislator who is thinking of putting out that bill. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I think it's certainly something that can be fixed, and we need to do more things like it. So I appreciate you being willing to say that. So as mayor, you're on the school board. I want to ask you, we've seen a lot of push towards privatizing in Tennessee. Governor Lee calls it school choice. He's for charters, he's for vouchers. Where are you on that whole conversation?
I'm a strong supporter of public education. I got a great public education, and my children did, all 4 of them, graduated from our city school system. And so the thing about it is, there's this false narrative out there that somehow when you go over to a charter school, it's going to be better and different, and all of a sudden you go from being a D student to an A student. And that's simply just not the case. The greater majority are not performing at this A-level type of school because the root causes, we've got great educators, whether they're in charter schools or public schools, but there's so much that schools are having to deal with because families are dealing with poverty and all that is associated and goes along with poverty. So we need to do more to invest in public schools. I mean, just to go to buildings where one of the schools in my district, where the ceiling collapsed in on the student beginning of the school year, and they are still not in their building because of due to the pandemic, we're having problems with supply chain and getting the proper tools in. But we've got aging schools all across our district, and we need to address that. So before you start siphoning off some of the money from public schools to send to charter schools, or worse yet, to private schools, we need to invest in public schools. So I've never been a proponent of the voucher program at all.
I hear you saying don't steer public dollars to private schools. It sounds like you're drawing a line between public schools and charter schools. One of the things Governor Lee regularly says is charter schools are public schools. And, my argument would be just because you send public dollars somewhere doesn't make it public. And, charter schools are run by private entities, often very opaquely. And I agree with you that public schools and charter schools are different. What do you say when Governor Lee says charter schools are public schools? And I think you have some background with charter schools, right?
I do. I actually was a part of a charter school as a founding board member for Crosstown High School here in Memphis. And I believe, at this point, they've been around for a long time. So I'm not saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, but at the same time, don't promote charter schools as the end-all be-all answer when the root problems are dealing with poverty and all that goes along with the challenges that families are having to deal with. So, okay, you can say public charter schools and part of that money, and perhaps some of them are doing it well, and they're serving their purpose. And I'm not gonna have a torch and pitchfork and say let's go get charter schools. I believe they have their place, and like I said, some of them are doing it well. But you cannot. It's almost how it's presented is that, oh gosh, public education is just bad and horrible, so the solution is all charter schools. You cannot, simply because the greater majority of students are going to be educated in traditional public schools. You cannot dismiss them, overlook them, and put them off to the side and not focus on it. But fortunately, I am hopeful, though, with the new funding formula that we have, that the governor has been, a big advocate for, that will make a difference.
Well, color me skeptical about that one, but hopefully, I guess just to give you my take, and I'm not putting these words in your mouth, but it seems like there are some good faith charter school people, but also there are people who are using charter schools kind of as a shield to push their agenda into Tennessee. And so it kind of blurs the lines. This isn't a strictly partisan issue one way or another. There are people on both sides who believe in charter schools, but there is this sort of effort, I believe, to use charter schools as a way to inject sort of a poison that hurts our public schools into the system. So it's a complicated issue. And at the end of the day, that's why I feel like you just have to stand strong for public schools. I don't mean to vilify anybody who ever has anything to do with charter schools, but I do think charter schools are being used to inject some poison into our system. That would be where I stand on that.
I hear you. And there are a lot who share that concern. And I think just from my perspective, just as a mom of 4 kids, as a school board member, because that's what I am right now, is that I want to make sure that, because we, just earlier this week, we had a hearing for a longtime charter school provider, and 2 of the schools, due to various reasons, mostly the pandemic, didn't meet the scorecard that the state puts out there. And so, but we have the discretion whether or not to approve charter renewal. And because of what the school was doing and what it provides for the community, I'm going to support that their charter gets renewed, because they are doing what they set themselves up, what they said that they would do for the school, for the students, and for that area of the community that they're serving. But I do not believe in promoting charter schools as the answer and privatizing all education, because we say we take one, we take all, and with public education. And
Right.
That's why it's so important to invest in it, because we turn no one away. And even with private schools, and they have that option and choice to not accept certain students. And that's not what taxpayer dollars are supposed to do. They are public taxpayer dollars to serve the greater community, everyone, not just an exclusive group.
One of the things you mentioned there is that you had the discretion to approve it. And, there's actually an article today in the New York Times about how Tennessee is at the forefront of cracking down on cities and localities and being able to govern themselves in various ways. We've seen repeatedly the state come into Memphis and tell them, no, you have to do things this way, whether it comes to education, residency requirements for police, that kind of thing. We're starting to say that it seems like Nashville and Memphis are occupied colonies of Tennessee. How do you feel about the dynamic between the state of Tennessee and the city of Memphis and frankly Nashville, and the way that those two things interact? And as mayor, is that something you could see standing up against?
There does seem to have an idea that what's good for the goose is not good for the gander in the state of Tennessee. And so when it comes to our largest metro areas here, Nashville and Memphis, and I just would love to see just the equity, whatever applies to Memphis and Nashville applies to the entire state. But it seems to be that we cherry pick. But I'm willing to have a conversation with anyone because I just simply want to do what is best for the people of Memphis and to so-called reach across the aisle. Because I don't view it in terms of, whether you are recognized as Republican or Democrat. We're all Memphians. And what impacts the least of us, so to speak, impacts all of us. So yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating when there are laws that are only applied to Memphis Shelby County schools, for example, as opposed to a smaller, more rural district in East Tennessee.
Right. And we have seen that the vouchers were passed just for Memphis and Nashville. And I've talked to a handful of Republicans in rural districts that didn't want those for their own districts. So there is something deeply hypocritical about that. You say you're willing to talk to anybody. One of the things we hear a lot from people on the ground in Memphis is that they don't really feel like they hear enough from their leaders. They don't get to talk to Mayor Strickland enough. They don't get to talk to the chief of police enough. How would you handle the dynamic between being mayor and talking to people on the ground and being accessible? Is that something that you would commit to, being more accessible to, locals, citizens, activists, that kind of thing?
Absolutely, well, without question. And the reason why I can say that so confidently is because what I have been doing for the last 4+ years as a school board member, it gives me life when I get outside of those meetings and go into schools and when I'm going to parent-teacher meetings and hearing from real people. Because sometimes when you get in these meetings and you're just looking at things on paper in black and white, you got to see there's a face and a person behind every single decision that you make. And something that I'm planning to launch as mayor, I want to have something that I'm calling Mondays with Michelle, and gonna send out calendar invites where you can have 15-minute conversations with me to share with me what your concerns are. I see continuing that as mayor, and also going into community meetings and hearing from them. I actually love interacting with the public. Perhaps it's because of my previous career as a news anchor and reporter. Getting out into the streets, I loved it. I loved live reporting. I love interacting with people because that's when you have a true pulse of what's happening in the community. So without question, and you have to meet with people who have opposing views from you. You can't just sit off in a corner of your home and it's like, well, everything's just rosy when it's not. So in the last few months, as I've been going around to all areas of Memphis, whether we're talking North Memphis or East Memphis, South Memphis, just to hear what they have to say. And everyone's got a perspective on what they believe needs to happen to make our city better.
What's your relationship like with Mayor Strickland? Do you have one?
I do. I wouldn't say it's a deep one, but yeah, we have a very good, respectful relationship. He appointed me to serve on the MATA board when he heard me speaking out about providing bus passes for students so they can go to jobs after school and participate in after school activities. And I said that because I was one of those kids. Growing up, I was one of 5 kids. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and we called it just homemaker back then. And my dad was, we had one car. And so there wasn't someone always to pick me up after school. So they put me on the city bus and I would go to cheerleading practice and I would come home. So when he heard me speaking about that one time, that's when we really got to meet each other. And had me ask me would I serve on the MATA board to add that perspective. And along the way, so yeah, we have a very friendly, cordial relationship. And so yeah.
Okay, well, so let's talk quickly before I let you go here, just about the Tyree stuff and some final thoughts on that. I just want to show people this was last night. This was Tyree's mom at a vigil and her thoughts on what's coming today.
It's going to be horrific. My Lord, my Lord. I didn't see it, but from what I hear, it's going to be horrific. But I want each and every one of you to protest in peace. I don't want us burning up our cities, tearing up the streets, because that's not what my son stood for.
So that was Tyree's mom last night at a vigil. I think they're at a church today. Obviously, we're sort of under a ticking clock right now until 6 p.m. when people are going to see this video. What thoughts do you have for your city as in this difficult time? Just before I let you go here.
Well, I was there at the vigil last night. I actually was just standing just left off the screen of the man with the pattern with the drums on. But I spoke with Mrs. Wells right after the vigil was finished. And I just went up to her and said, I'm so sorry. I can't begin to imagine what you're going through. I have 3 sons, 2 of whom were skaters and actually skateboarded in that park where we were last night. And she shared with me, she held my hand and she says, Michelle, because I told her I'm Michelle Mckissack, I'm running for mayor of Memphis. And I promise you that as mayor, I want to make sure that we have some ordinances, some laws in place with Tyree's name on it to honor his memory. And that was so important to her when she said, Michelle, that's the thing. I don't want his death to be in vain. And she was said, I feel like I'm in a movie. She goes, this feels so unreal. I feel like I'm in a movie. And she also said to me that she did not want children to see that video. She was still in mom mode, even in that time. And the dignity and the grace in which she has put herself out there just to bring humanity to her child and to put a spotlight to say that this should not happen to anyone. I'm hoping from this that as a community, we do protest peacefully and calmly. That's what she would want. If you know the skater community, they're a real chill, laid back group, no matter what they are, white, black, or otherwise. And they just love to just be peaceful. And that's what I experienced when I was that skater mom and hanging out at skate parks with my sons. And so that's what we have to focus on, to honor his memory and to truly have justice and change and accountability for our police and to improve as a community, as a city as a whole. And I'm hopeful that we will be a model for the nation of how to have better policing and to change. I know we keep saying that, but I really, really hope and believe that we can affect change. And that's certainly what I'm going to fight for. That's exactly what I'm going to fight for as mayor.
Well, thanks for coming on here. I completely agree with you. I think the devil is always in the details about how do we get specific about, change. What are the big ticket items that we can change? A couple things that always come to mind are, civil penalties coming out of police budgets as opposed to the taxpayers' general fund, so that there's actually some incentive for them to police each other so that they actually feel it when this stuff happens. Like you said, not letting unmarked cars pull over people for, regular police stops, figuring out other people to, stop them. And then also there just seems to be a general training issue. These guys all seem to, and gals all seem to be, so itchy with the trigger finger. They're looking for action and any excuse, and they take it, and they just feel like they're operating with impunity. So, I would just encourage you to be as specific as you can about the things that you would support. And, if you are mayor of Memphis, I know people are going to be looking for that. So good luck to you. And thank you for coming on here, Michelle.
Thank you, Justin, for having me.
All right. Thank you. That is Michelle Mckissack. Mckissack? Did she say Mckissack or Mckissack? No, I'm not sure. One of those two. I think it's Mckissack. Nod your head. Yes. Okay. Mckissack. Okay. She's running for mayor of Memphis. It's a crowded field. I don't know how many are in yet. I've heard a lot of names bandied about. She's a school board member. and she's the first one we've talked to. So respect to her for coming on here and talking to us. Tonight is a very important night in Memphis. They've taken a lot of measures to, I guess, brace themselves and try to douse the not literal, but literal and figurative flames before they happen. And I guess that's to be commended. I have said repeatedly that I shudder to think what it would be like if Amy Wyrick was still the DA instead of Steve Mulroy, because I just think there's a general, faith that they're actually trying to do the right thing that comes from having a progressive DA who talks about reform, whereas Amy Wyrick, all the reform she cared about was locking more people up, like people for voting, like Pam Moses. So there's that. There's also the, unique element here where the officers are Black, which it's hard. It's actually impossible not to notice how quickly they were fired and arrested compared to some of the other white officers we've seen that perpetrate some of the same tragedies, horrors. It's just impossible to ignore that. So, hopefully this will be a precedent for how we treat cops like this in the future, regardless of color. And, again, it just comes down to how do we fix this? What do we change? How do we get specific? You're going to see a lot of statements in the coming days from all aspects, caucuses and Republicans and leaders and mayors across the state will give statements. Statements are easy to give. What is the real change here? And sometimes it might not be politically supported by everybody. I mentioned lowering police budgets and steering those resources elsewhere. I'm not out there in the streets with a defund the police sign, although I do think that's what those signs meant. They were just sort of twisted into like abolish the police. Some people do think abolish the police makes sense. I don't necessarily think that, but I do think defund the police, refund the police, rethink the police. Like these are things that we need to do in a real way, not waiting till the next Tyree Nichols happens and issuing statements again and changing nothing substantive. That can't happen, but it happens every time. And they passed some legislation last session that was police reform legislation. What did it change? I don't know. It's easy to write words on a page. It's too easy to write words on a page. It's harder to actually change things. And we need change makers in the right positions. I look at the effort to put Mulroy in that seat and what it's doing in a concrete, real way right now. Yet to be seen how far this goes, but I do think there is a general sense of faith that he's trying, that he's saying the right things. He talked about police reform in his press conference. That's important. And by the way, at that press conference, CJ Davis was not there, and even Mulroy didn't know why. And neither was Jim Strickland, the mayor. He was not at that press conference. So we need people who are going to be at those press conferences, that are going to roll up their sleeves and talk to the people who have ideas and get real things done. Because, any sense of what these guys were doing in that quote unquote Scorpion unit, they were out of control and they felt supported by the system. So this is a systemic issue. This is not one bad cop, 5 bad cops, 8 bad cops. Something is wrong, not just in Memphis, throughout this country. And it comes down hardest on Black people, Black men and women, minorities across the country. And just like with our gun violence in this country, we just go through this routine where we act horrified, we grieve, and we move on until the next one. It just can't continue like this, but it's going to, until the right people are in the right places to put a stop to it. And I don't sit here claiming to have all the answers, but I do know, I know when I hear it, and I think you do too. And I hope you'll vote for those people. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.